I almost am ashamed of what I'm going to do, because this is not meant to be anything formal or anything deep or anything especially spiritual. I figure that these conclaves are they're partly schools, but they have a social function, and it's sort of like you share what you're doing lately. And so I'm sharing what I've been doing lately, and I don't know what I'm doing. This is the second in a series of talks called Richard Talks About What He Doesn't Know. And one thing, since there are several professionals in this field, don't snigger when I make mistakes. We have one doctor and 2 nurses at least, and I want no sniggering. This is actually going to be a talk about anatomy and physiology. The founder of our organization thought that since we were all becoming healers, that every time we get together, that we talk about something that relates to healing, like studying physiology or studying anatomy or such like that. And that's what I've been doing. I take a few minutes, try to do it every day, and read a little bit of a physiology and anatomy book and try to relate it to spiritual studies, both the esoteric things and just simple things for healing. And so what I'm going to be talking about is the human heart. But there's a real irony in this, because while I'm talking about healing, my body is very sick at this moment. So I'm not going to hang on very long, and it may not be very clear. Simple things. The heart is one of the unique organs. That is, we have only one. We have several other, there are other singulars, but the heart is, like the lungs are dual, and the dual capacity of the lungs, they both do the same thing, only it's split so that you get more volume. The eyes, for example, are dual, but they're dual for a much different reason, because it gives you depth perception, and working together you accomplish something that you almost cannot accomplish with one. But the heart is unique in that it's central. It's not like the liver, which is located off on the side, and it's central not only physically, but it's central in terms of our consciousness. Like we have only one brain, but the brain is located peripherally, whereas the heart is located centrally up and down. You don't count the legs, at least most spiritual philosophers don't. They're used to sitting anyway, and if you're sitting, you don't need legs, right? All right. My humor is... All right, so we're dealing with a unique organ. According to spiritual research, the heart is the first organ that is differentiated in the embryo, which is not surprising, because the seed atom, boy, we have people here who don't understand these terms, so I'm going to have to stop. In Rosicrucian esotericism, we have a notion that is a rather unique one, or a very interesting one anyway, and that's called the principle of a seed atom. And that is to say that our relationship to any plane whereon or wherein we exist, we have a specific focal point. And that is ours throughout eternity. We don't even share that one with the bank. That one is really ours. And for the physical body, all of our past physical forms, when we went through like a mineral-like existence, a plant-like existence, animal-like existence and all of our human existence, all of our past lives, everything, the effect of it is impressed on the seed atom of our heart. And so when we come to birth, what we're doing when we're building a body, it's just like in embryology. We recapitulate our entire past spiritual evolution. We begin almost like a mineral, and we're almost plant-like for a while, and we go through all of these earlier stages of evolution. We do it very quickly in the embryo. It's only nine months before a fetus comes to term, 9 months and I think 6 days or something like that. And when we come to birth, our physical body is an expression of all of our past experience at form. That is to say, we cannot build a body that is out of our experience. You might say the way we relate or the way we resonate to the whole of matter is impressed in our history of matter that is within us. And so that is what is, it's a focal point. And this is placed, you can take this as mythology if you like, there's a lovely little story. In Rosicrucian esotericism, it is said that at the conception, this focal point is placed in the head of the sperm that impregnates the ovum. And everything builds around that seed atom. All the form is attracted according to what we've done from the past. We do a little bit of experimentation, and the mother has a little bit of time for experimentation also, completely apart from whatever we do. So the heart then is the first thing that is differentiated. It is then our complete record of what we essentially are. You might say the spirit is capable of all potential. However, it is described by the amount of soul that it has garnered. Soul being the effects of our interactions. We kick a chair, we stub our toe, we do something stupid, or if we do something very positive, all of our actions, the essence of those actions is taken out as soul, and it gets built into our spirit, and all the potential of the spirit, which could be anything, becomes defined by our actions. And so the spirit is a reflection of all of our past deeds. Whatever our consciousness is a reflection of that. And that, in the physical sense, is focused in the heart. And this is, I think, what it means. I like folk language a lot. And what we say with street language reflects very deep spiritual truths. And when we say something that this is the heart of the matter, or this person was the heart of the movement, what it's meaning to say is that the basic nucleus, the fundamental character of something, is found in the heart. All right. Let's look at a few other things about the heart. Now we have to go into, I was assuming that everybody here was at least fairly proficient with Rosicrucian philosophy, but I'm not sure of that. In the Rosicrucian philosophy, very much like Bob was talking about in his musical talk, that manifest spirit is defined in Trinity. That these three lines are the least number of lines that completely objectify the space of this blackboard. If you just have one line running all the way across, it sort of defines it, but both sides carry on ad infinitum. But when you have three lines crossing, you have defined a space in the simplest way possible. And that basic creation, that basic definition of spirit in space, in the potential of space, permeates throughout all of creation. That Trinity, I should have left all of Bob's charts up here, is divided. No, yes. Okay, all right, good. All right. The Creator, that is what wills to be, in Rosicrucian parlance, is called the Divine Spirit. That is associated with the spiritual masculine. The life spirit is associated with the spiritual feminine. The life spirit is associated with imagination. And almost like an ancient Trinitarian thought, these two manifest so closely with each other that they're almost indifferentiable. Like in standard Christian parlance, Christ says, Christ, who is a living expression of the life spirit, says, to know me is to know the Father. And it turns out that you can't tell whether the imagination is drawing out the will or whether the will is projecting the imagination, because the two go hand in hand. You cannot, for example, work on visualization. You cannot work on being able to picture or imagine things in yourself without developing a tremendously powerful willpower. And so the two work together. And from them is born the male-female androgyne human spirit, which in the cosmic trinity is called the Holy Spirit. Now, there's a curious notion that is sometimes, I think, badly used, and it's a misinterpretation of the book of Genesis in the Bible, where it says humans are made in the image of God. And some people then think that all humans, they think of God as almost like in the Michelangelo painting, with a great big long hair and a beard and poking a finger and such like that. On one hand, that has to be false, because if you read the entire Bible carefully, if we're made in the image of God, it says in another place in the Bible that God is a spirit and must be worshipped in spirit. Therefore, we ourselves are spirit. We are foci of spirit. But in a very peculiar way, even physically, since the body is a direct representation of the spirit, all of the drama that is worked out in our spiritual consciousness is also played out in our body. And so the way this goes is that different parts of the body or different systems of the body are given different rulerships. For example, the divine spirit is associated with metabolism. It's associated with just the pure limbs and the pure overpowering of food. Whereas the life spirit is associated with all of the rhythmic activities. This is all mentioned in one sentence in the Cosmic Conception, and you could spend lifetimes studying all the physiology and anatomy that is behind it. The life spirit is associated with the rhythmic activity in the center of the body. Just like you might say that the limbs, being the legs, like they tell you, always lift with your legs. The greatest power is in the limbs and in the metabolism. In the middle of the body, is where the life spirit, where the Christ is located, and that's where all the rhythmic activities go on, the breathing and the heart rate. And finally, at the top of the body, the human spirit, which is associated with thinking, is associated with the central nervous system. So each of the attributes of our threefold spirit has a primary and a secondary seat in the body from one point of looking at it. Like the primary seat of the human spirit is in the pineal gland, which, by the way, is the second thing that is differentiated in the embryo. And that is to say that the spiritual control of the whole embryonic process is brought in as early as possible, and the control and regulatory mechanism is found in the endocrine system. So the pineal gland is the second organ developed. But the secondary seat of the human spirit is the brain and central nervous system. Now the life spirit, if this is willing, this is feeling or loving as opposed to thinking. The life spirit has its secondary seat, has its primary seat in the pituitary body, which is why the followers of the feeling rather than the followers of thinking, those who attain to spirituality by feeling, by acceptance, by loving, those are the pituitary types of people. They usually have those very warm, receptive, deer-like eyes. And they are just creatures that can't help but to feel. The secondary seat of the life spirit is found in the heart. Now, this plays together with what we've been talking about all along, in that the heart has the record of everything we've ever done before. And when that is put together, when we say that someone is good-hearted or is heartfelt, it's someone who is feeling. And when you put that loving feeling, love with a capital L, which is unconditional love, which is altruistic as well as individual love, love with a capital L put together with history comes out as conscience. Because the Iranian intuition, which comes from the life spirit, doesn't even bother with explaining why. It just immediately gives you the truth of something. And when that immediate truth knowing has access to all of your memories of what you have and haven't done, that's called conscience. You have a feeling that your heart, you're prisoner of your heart, that you can't do something if you don't feel it. You can't not do something if you feel in your heart the need to do this. And that quality of conscience, what I'm trying to do is define, I'm trying to describe my view of physiology according to, as I see the spiritual studies, as well as looking at things physiologically. And I don't want this to be too just plain physiology, so I'm trying to put a few other things in there before we get into where I'm going to make all the blunders. I want you all to take notes. Lou is a physician, and these two ladies who are sitting above and below the piano here are both nurses. And they know all this stuff inside out, because after all, what you learn in a moment, you learn most intensely. Sometimes you have, in one moment, you experience something and you remember it for a lifetime. And if you crammed in one night, that must stay with you for a lifetime too, right? All right. One more occult fact, and I think we're just about ready to begin then. And that is, the heart is a muscle. It is a spiral muscle of all things. If you see the way a heart goes, it's almost like making and releasing a fist. It twists in like that. It only twists in at a sort of a jerk as it comes out like that. because it's a muscle, and it really gives, like in our language, it gives its heart to everything. Every time your heart beats, it goes all out, and then it relaxes. It's very much like the characteristics of Leo that we associate with the heart. Either they work and they give it everything they got, or they lay around and play, and that's the characteristic that the heart has. It gives everything it has, but it's all muscle. Now, the different tissues of the body are also given different rulership. For example, the bones are associated with the divine spirit. And clearly, nerve tissue is associated with the human spirit. The direct expression of the desire body in the physical is the muscular system. You might say, every time, musicians can tell you, that it takes a while to build muscles to be able to play the piece of music you want to play. You can conceptualize in your mind the way you have to move your fingers, and you can develop neurons to do that, but it takes a few days or sometimes a few weeks to develop the muscles. And those muscles are representations. I have the desire to be able to play this chord followed by this chord and this chord. That's a desire. And what we desire is what develops our muscles. You might say that the streams of desire material that run through the desire body actually are what form our muscles. In fact, it's a curious fact. Rudolf Steiner points it out. And if you have very good ears and you can get in a very silent place, the desire body is an inverse reflection of the human spirit. And that is to say, the music of the spheres of the human spirit is reflected in the desire body. And if you make a muscle and tense it really hard and listen very closely with your ear against it, you can hear an echo of the music of the spheres in your muscles. Another thing is that the original word that Bob was talking about, the word that goes behind everything, is actually an octave of the rush of the blood through our blood vessels. But these are all side trips. You might say spice for the stew. But the point that I want to make about the heart being a muscle, that gives it feeling in another sense. All of our emotions, our desires, our passions, are things that come from the desire body. When we're talking about the life spirit, we're talking about love in a very transcendent sense, in a Neoplatonistic sense. But when we're talking about desire, emotion, romance, all of those things are things that come from the desire body. So both kinds of feeling have a center, because obviously the heart is almost completely muscle. There's connective tissue, and there are a few tendons and layers of fat and blood vessels, but the greatest mass of the heart is muscle. It is both horizontal muscles and longitudinal muscles, smooth muscles and bunch muscles, you might say. I don't know the right term there, Lou. Just don't be hard on me. But what I'm trying to say is the action of the heart is an action of desire, especially the desire to live. All right, when we get into the actual physiology, we'll look at that. And since it is both, since the muscles are crossed horizontally as well as the longitudinal differentiation, that means it is both a voluntary and an involuntary muscle. We all know that there are people that can stop their heart or that can change the movement of their heart through their consciousness, not through their nerves, but they can do it through their consciousness, which is quite a feat, because we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, why that can or can't be done. So that is then saying that when we say that, for example, let's use really basic examples, when we say that a football player has a lot of heart, that's saying he has a lot of desire. The two are quoted together. So like both, well, I'd like to get into a recondite thing here, but I think I'm going to have to pass on it because too many people wouldn't understand what I was talking about, not because it's deep, but because it requires previous knowledge. So, but the heart then is a vehicle of feeling of transcendental love, and it is a vehicle of feeling of the most basic and raw emotional desire and love. All right. I'll just mention a few rough facts about the heart. Since it is absolutely essential to our health, it has lots and lots of protection. It's very hard to penetrate to your heart. Actually, the only easy way that you can penetrate to the heart is to come straight down through here. But because of the location of the collarbone and the ribs, the area of the heart is well protected. Not only is it well protected, but it is well fed. Some of the very first arteries that come off with the blood, the heart pumps the blood, but some of the first arteries that branch off are the arteries that feed the heart. So the heart is very well taken care of. And there is a principle, there is internally in the consciousness, I don't know how to say this. The human body is not just a bunch of parts that are assembled. There is a singular spirit that holds the whole body together. And though it's spirit, it's not all self-conscious. A lot of what takes place in our body is done with great spiritual intelligence by our spiritual selves, but we're not conscious of it. In fact, more of the spiritual activity that takes place in our body is done unconsciously than consciously. But there is an intelligence like, how do I say this? The things that are most difficult to reproduce, the things that are most vital to our continued existence, the spiritual intelligence hangs on to the most. So that, for example, if you starve someone to death, there will never be massive heart loss. I think it's less than 3% of degeneration of the central nervous system and the heart. I think it's usually usually around 1.5%. Some other things are that, like the pancreas is the first thing to go. They found people at various stages of starvation, which is not fasting, so we're talking about starvation. And if somebody is, when you get to the point that you've used up all of your stores in your body and you start eating your own vital tissue and no longer just using stores, that's called starvation. And they've done autopsies on people at the 3 days of starvation, 5 days of starvation, such like that. The first thing to go is the pancreas. I think that by the time you're 20 days into starvation, I don't think you have any pancreas left. But if you die of starvation, the heart is still intact. It's sort of like unconsciously the spiritual intelligence that we're rarely in touch with makes sure that the heart and the brain is well taken care of. All right. It also has a stupendous resistance. The heart can come back from terrible, terrible trauma. There can be all kinds of dead tissue and everything else, and it keeps on living, and it becomes all scarred and all, but it just keeps right on going. All right. Now let's get down into simple physiology and just talk about a few little things about the heart and some curiosities. the heart is actually centrally located. It covers an area about from here down to here. It's shaped like a fat pine cone. Something like that. The lower part of it is called the apex. Actually, it's just about centrally located. This is too big on this side. But because the left side of the heart, the left ventricle of the heart, has to pump the body through the entire system, the blood through the entire system, its muscular development is much, much stronger, which has the greater development in the left side, so that it's easier to feel the heart on the left side than the right. But actually, it is centrally located. All right. I just want to, this is going to be sort of like fascination with science, because I can sit and read physiology books. I think I could read them, sometimes the same book, over again and again for all the rest of the days of my life, and I'd still never fail to be fascinated by it. But the heart is, I'm not going to give you all of the technical names for this, basically because I don't remember them and I don't think they're essential. But the heart is actually located in a sac. The sac is connected on the diaphragm, and it's connected on all of the large arteries and veins that come in the top side of the heart. And it's one big sac. Now, the interesting thing about the heart that is really wonderful, it's like slipping into clean sheets at night, which is something I don't experience very often. So for me, it's especially wonderful. Everything in the heart is layered so that things slide past each other. And it's amazing because there are so many movements, so many, that it's a three-dimensional kind of movement, and it's going on continuously as long as you live. And there are, the different types of work that have to be done could put a lot of friction. And so that what I'm trying to say is that in terms of keeping everything lubricated and keeping everything so that there is flexibility for movement in different dimensions, it's layered. So that this is just a wonderful principle to keep in mind about anything. If like we see it all the time with this Dale is with the man with the Martian ears has helped me do most of the remodeling. Everything that looks good is because of him, and everything that's out of square is because of me. And when we put this mud on the drywalling, you get a much better job of feathering it out so that you can't see where all the cracks are if you do it in little layers and then smooth it off and layers and smooth it off. Almost everything in life happens much easier if you do it in layers, and especially if you have to have surfaces move past each other. And so this is one of the big principles of the heart, is that it's layers. All right? I'm going to skip some material. In the sac around the heart, I'll just say that there are two layers. One is a tough, fibrous layer, and its function is holding everything in place. The inner layer is called a serous layer, and its function is lubrication. So it's sort of like it's specialization of labor over layers. All right. Then the heart itself is three-layered. Again, the outer layer is associated with the membrane on the inside of the fluid. There is a serous fluid that the whole heart, all of them, but that's another thing. Our whole body is hydraulically protected. Like the brain is floated in cerebrospinal fluid, And the heart, with all of its moving parts, is suspended in a serous fluid. Serous. Serious. All right. That means I'm being egoistic again. When I add I's in my words that aren't supposed to be there, I'm being ego-centered. And the outer layer is smooth and protective. The middle layer is the layer that does all of the work. And it varies from a very thin amount to it can be almost that thick. You've cut them apart. I haven't. Is it about the thickness on the left ventricle? It's called the myocardium. And it's very thick, and it's all muscle. It varies in thickness, like the upper chambers, which we're going to talk about in a few seconds, are called atria. And they don't have to do much pumping. They only just force the blood down into the lower chambers, so those walls are very thick. But when you get to the left ventricle, where it's got to be able to drive blood, I don't know which is harder. You get gravity help to the legs. Yesterday we were hanging mirrors, and boy, if you want to know how hard the heart has to work and how much you need your nutrition, just try holding your hand over your head and hold it up there for 20 minutes once, and you just ache all over. It's not only the muscles, but the blood isn't coming there. In fact, there are some people that, this is a sideline diversion, but there are these curious people that get all these daft health food notions. And I read this one man once that he said, do you know the amount of time that it takes an eagle from birth to maturity, and the amount of maturity relative to the maturation period in eagle is much longer. A human being, almost a third of your life is spent maturing, and you only get just a little bit of time as an adult. And he figured the reason why eagles had such a long life relative to the maturity cycle was because they were diving and their head was below their heart, and the heart didn't have to work so hard in order to get circulation to the vital nervous system. And so he advocated that if you sleep at night and put your legs up in the air and tilt them, you'll have a much greater flow of blood to your brain, and you'll have a healthier brain, and you'll live longer. I tried it. I really tried it. I got cramps. Yeah. But at any rate, it's all muscle. And then finally, the inner layer of the heart, which is called the endocardium, obviously, is made up of smooth muscle. And it's sort of, it's like an automobile engine. Or I have a friend that is has a motorcycle that he's put thousands of dollars into it. He studies all of these mechanical engineers from Cambridge University and things like that. He's got this super motorcycle, and he actually took and went into the combustion chambers and all the exhaust manifolds and sandblasted them smooth and then chrome-plated them. Because if they're perfectly smooth, the gases come out much quicker, and so that the motor is much more responsive. So this is a motorcycle like you'll not find anywhere. And so the heart uses that same principle. It uses smooth muscle and connective tissue, and the inside of the heart, even though it's stringy, it's slick, and so that the blood can pass with the least amount of friction. All right. So we have. I won't try to say any. Try to make any kind of correspondences that this layer relates to this and that, because I don't know anything about that spiritually. And I just want to try to share facts. The final thing is that the heart is covered with fat. And that's there for several reasons. Number one is protection. Another kind of protection, thermal protection, because you don't want your heart to go into shock, and you don't want to lose all of your heat. I never used to believe it when they say, "Oh, when you go out, never run outside when you're soaking wet." I thought that was foolish. I thought they say you get a chill. And when you think about it, part of the energy that is evaporating the water in wet clothing is coming from your vital body. And you're weakening your vital body in evaporating water that's drying on you, and you can indeed not really get a chill, but you can weaken your vital body and be more susceptible to being invaded by illnesses. The vital body is an energy body that radiates. It's an etheric body that radiates out. It's our relationship to the world of energy in the same way that this is our relationship to the world of form. And the desire body is our relationship to the world of emotions and such like that. We have some people that are not at all familiar with the terms. So, like, obviously, since there's a complete engorgement of all the blood at some time within every few minutes or every few seconds, all the blood passes through the heart, and most of the heat in the body is in the blood. You want to keep it protected. So the heart is covered with fat, and the fat acts as an insulator. Also, it is a source of energy in case needed. Like the muscles sometimes need to have immediate breakdown products for food sources. All right, we've talked a little bit about the way the heart is. It's in a sac. This is a very enlarged sac, which has two layers: a fibrous layer and then a thin inner layer. And then the heart itself is a thin layer here, and then a lot of muscle, which is greater down in here. And inside is another layer, endocardium, which is smooth and well bound together, somewhat stringy in its outward appearance. All right, it's actually broken into 4 chambers. The 2 upper chambers are called atria, which is plural for atrium, and I believe atrium means room in Latin. And so they have all of the major veins, superior vena cava, and I forget all of them. We'll talk about the circulation system some other time. But all of the veins come pouring into them. There's nothing to stop the inflow of blood into the atria. Blood is there. They accept blood at all times, and they fill up with blood, and they have a relaxation period while they fill up with blood, and they squeeze close. And as they squeeze close, in the lower part of the heart, there are valves in between here. Muscles on some tendons pull open what are called the atrioventricle valves. The one on the right side is called a tricuspid, and the one on the left side is called a bicuspid, which means one has 3 flaps and one has 2 flaps. The reason I think for the 3 flaps on this side is because there's a much greater volume that comes from the whole body, whereas on the left atrium, it only gets the amount that was pumped out to the lungs in the last cycle. So right in here is a valve that is connected to some muscles with some tendons. And these are called papillary muscles. And at the same time that this is beginning to close, the phasing goes that the papillary muscles pull open these valves, and the blood just flows and is pushed down into the ventricles. And then the impulse goes that the blood is in the ventricles, and as the muscles relax in the atria, these muscles relax, and the valve goes back up, and the tendons that hold it keep it so that there can't be a back pressure to blow the valve up into the atrium. It's a really nice valving system. And then the ventricles, as they close, they squeeze out the blood through the arteries, either to the lungs or to the whole rest of the body. So then you have 4 chambers, 2 atria, and 2 ventricles. And between the ventricles and the arteries are semilunar valves. They're called semilunar because they look like moons, and they fit together. There's no cords or anything on them because they're just backstop valves. They go one way, that when the ventricle is pumping, it squeezes and all the blood pushes this way, and when it relaxes, they just flap back. I think there's some muscular action there, but there's no pressure, no heavy pressure on this side, so they don't have to have all of the tendons and the papillary muscles and things like that to hold them in place. And then the blood courses out, and it can't flow back. Of course, there are valve leaks and things like that when blood runs back in. And I don't want to go into all of that. I just want to be very quick about all of this. And that is basically what the whole heart is. It's 4 chambers. We're going to talk about a few other little things. It is 4 chambers, 2 valves between the atria and the till they reach engorgement with blood, and then they squeeze and put everything down into the ventricles, and then they relax. But while they're relaxing, then the ventricles it's like a smooth impulse going from the top of the heart down to the apex. And while the atria are relaxing, the ventricles squeeze and carry through the motion, and all the blood is forced out into the body. Now, this is a tremendously beautiful system because it's almost like motorcycles. You could have a 2-chamber heart. It would be difficult because the 2 chambers would have to alternate with each other. You could have one chamber receive all of the blood from the system, the systemic venous blood, and when it got full, you could have a valve on the top and it would close and you could squeeze everything out to the lungs. And then when it is done squeezing and relaxing, then the blood could come into the other chamber and till it was filled up, and then it could pump. But it would be a jerky kind of motion. And what is so beautiful, because our body is so sensitive, there are sensors all in the brain and in other places, because it's the circulatory system for the brain is amazing. There are at least, to get to every cell in the brain, or every little region of the brain, there are at least 3 routes. Some come up arteries here, and some come from arteries that come up through the center and then back down. And there's one area of the brain that's sort of like, you've ever seen those intersections that they're like little raceways where you can come on either side? There's an area right in the center of the brain that is fed from several different arteries, because you daren't because nervous tissue is not at all regenerable, or it can be regenerated, but only under special circumstances. And so there has to be a constant pressure of blood to the brain, and so it has all of these alternate routes, and the pressure is kept in that little circle. It's called a saddle or something. You know what the name of it is? Circle of Willis. All right. Man knows it right off the top of his head, or right in the top of his head. And it keeps all the pressure. So the body is it's necessary to have this constant, delicate pressure of blood throughout the body. Everything has to be fed regularly. So if you had a 2-chambered heart, everything would be jerky. And then there's another problem. If something is squeezing, if one side is squeezing, it would not allow blood to come into it from the body. And if you didn't allow blood to come into it from the body, you would be having all kinds of ruptured blood vessels. The blood vessels would have to be much, much stronger. And so this system, where you have both atria, where both sides of the heart have an atrium and both have a ventricle, It's like a four-stroke engine that always things can be coming in at the same time blood is being forced out. And like the left atrium is open at the same time that the right ventricle is putting pressure, putting the blood out of the lungs, and you have a smooth transition. What I'm trying to get to is a principle. If you just divide things in half, it's like before, it doesn't accomplish you anything. It's like putting that one line all the way across the board. It's either one side of the line or it's the other. There's sort of a competitive jerkiness. But if you take like the four seasons of the heart or the four chambers of the heart, you have a smooth transition. And that way, each part is resting at just the time it performs a function while it's resting. While the other part is working, one part is resting and it's receiving. And then while it's working, then the second part is resting. So that it's I get excited about things like this.
Are you saying that the left ventricle and the right atrium squeeze at the same time?
No. I said that the right ventricle squeezes at the same time the left atrium is relaxing. So the right ventricle is putting blood out to the lungs at the same time that the left atrium is open to receive the venous blood back from the lungs.
Oh.
See, that's why it's so smooth. If you just think about the principle, and if you sit there, you've ever taken a balloon and squeeze it down in the middle, tie a string around it, and leave a little bit of space there. You can. That's what you'd have if you had a two-chamber heart. But if you have the four chambers set up the way this is, it makes a very, very smooth device. There's brilliance everywhere in the heart. There are a few curiosities. You're not happy yet?
I'm happy.
Oh, okay. I want to talk about something that I've been describing it all along. It's called the cardiac cycle. And that is how the impulse starts in the upper heart, contracting the atria, and while the ventricles are relaxed, and then moving down to the ventricles while the atria are relaxing. Again, going like that. This part, outer upper part, is contracting, and then it's followed through by the lower part. This is a very interesting phenomenon, and it is spiritually very significant. And that is, the heart is connected to the autonomous nervous system. That is the vagus nerve, which in the old days was called the pneumogastric nerve, which is one of the 12 cranial nerves. It's the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It has to do with lung activity. It has to do with heart activity. It has to do with digestive activity, and it goes all the way to the liver. I'm not sure the whole route of it. You could probably tell me very, very clearly, but this is the curious thing, and it's in almost all folk societies, it has been recognized as being significant and being magical in a way. That even though the heart is connected to the autonomous nervous system, it is only regulated. It is only regulated by the autonomous nervous system. It is self-initiating. And it's a very curious self-regulation. It goes back to an earlier stage of evolution that our nervous system developed out of the muscular system. The nervous system, in terms of all of our systems, is the latest addition. But there is the sinusoidal node, which is a bunch of muscles, And these muscles put out electrical impulses. And there are sensors that sense temperature and pressure and things like that, and you can psychologically, you can cause your heart to beat faster or slower. Panic, older people, their heart rate is slower and their pulse is lower. Younger people have a stronger, overactive heart rate almost. But it can regulate it, but the heart is a standalone vehicle. It starts all by itself. I'm sure you've seen these voodoo movies and things like that where they take a heart out of someone and the heart is beating while it's outside of the body. And that is a recognition of the fact that the spirit, the heart of our being, what time are we at? Am I supposed to be done at 5? All right. I'm just about done. This is why having the heart of someone else, people even used to eat out of other animals and other human beings. They used to eat live hearts because they thought they were taking in the essence of the spirit, because the heart, most of the other things, the three systems are divided. Without the food coming from the metabolic system, we can't do anything. But without the blood and the oxygen, the food can't be brought anywhere. But neither the metabolism nor the blood can do much of anything without nervous stimulation. And so there are three completely independent or interdependent systems. But here, all of a sudden in the heart, we have a vehicle that stands all by itself. This is a representation of the two foci of feeling all over again. The life spirit, that is the willingness to live, and the desire to live, make the heart a very unique organ. We live almost by the desire of our heart. This is why there is a difference between brain death and heart death. Because the brain can be dead, and the node in the heart, the common name for the node in the heart is called a pacemaker. The pacemaker can still keep the heart beating, and you may be brain dead, but you're not heart dead. That happens quite often. Like if someone has a stroke, for example, they may lose neural function or quite a bit of neural function. In my estimation, that's a matter of someone who has put too much into their head and not enough into their heart. And so that then they sit there knowing they can't think, and they just more or less watch their heart beat until, what I'm trying to say, this is also the, I don't want to go into that. It'd be too much of a side trip. All right. Another thing about the pacemaker that I wanted to be sure to mention, not only is the heart unique in setting its own pace and activating, initiating itself, but each individual, without having any regulation from the autonomous nervous system, each individual has their own pace. That if just left alone, each person has their own pace, which is again a statement about the nature of the heart, or that is the soul material that has produced an individual unique. They're very close to each other. You can average them out, and probably the average number of heartbeats per minute in everybody in the room would be very, very close. But each individual has their own pace. All right, I think I've got enough to get that point across. And there's another point about the heart that I think is very interesting, especially from the spiritual point of view, and that is we know that the ego has two different kinds of functions or two different kinds of conscious expressions in the body. One is through the nervous system, both conscious and unconscious. It activates things. It reaches out in perception. That's one vehicle of the ego. And there is a specialization of the etheric body, a specialization of the reflecting ether that we call nervous fluid. Regular medicine doesn't recognize it. They talk about neurons being produced by electrochemical reactions and things like that. And the whole idea of an ether as a specialized nervous fluid is a notion that's a little bit weird to them. And the other expression, that is of the human spirit. That focus of the ego, that is the human spirit, functions more through the nervous system, and the reflecting ether is specialized as nervous fluid. The life spirit works through the light ether, and it works through the bloodstream. And there is a gaseous light ether flowing through the bloodstream all the time. So that the part of our threefold spirit, the part of our spiritual ego that is associated with the focus of the life spirit, is to be found in the blood in the same way that the Holy Spirit or human spirit is found in the nerves. And this is a common thing. We all know this. Like if I were, for example, to try and tune that piano or to tune that guitar, I wouldn't do that because that's out of my field, as Bob would say. When I do tune the guitar, my ears get bright red. And if you digest food, all the blood goes to your stomach. Or in the male physiology, when there's sexual excitement, that is a complete engorgement of blood. And this is an unconscious action of the ego. It's one of those that is not a conscious action. But the life spirit working through the blood, the esotericists, especially the Rosicrucian variety, have claimed for a long time that the blood drives the heart as much as the heart drives the blood. And there is physiological evidence for that. Because if the blood volume and the blood pressure that is in the chambers of the heart, if it isn't sufficient, the heart gets weak. In order for a muscle to be able to contract well, it has to be expanded well. And it is, if we have, if our blood runs thin and our blood runs hot and we have a high volume of blood, like they do in the Olympics, the skaters, they do this blood doping because their heart works much harder and they also have more oxygen in their blood. You know what blood doping is? They take their blood and they store it away in a refrigerator, and just before a race, they increase the blood volume dramatically so that they can carry more oxygen and that they can work the heart to its fullest extent. And so then when suppose the ventricle is got a large capacity of blood there, it gets stretched a lot, and then it works much harder. And so the point is that the idea that the blood drives the heart as much as the heart drives the blood is a truism. And that is, if we learn to direct our full attention through the blood, that is, through our feeling, through our desire, through our love of something, we not only have more attention there, not only have more warmth there, but we actually work our heart much better. That's another thing I want to mention about the heart. The whole physical body, like the mandala, the astrological mandala, is a symbol of God in manifestation. And God, the macrocosm, works on all of these wonderful, wonderful balances. And in the physical body, there are also a lot of wonderful balances. And all of those balances spell out one word which, extremist though I am, it's a word that I never would have uttered 25 years ago. And I'm ashamed now that in some ways that I have to mention it. But everything about the whole body, including the heart, it works well with moderation. If you do nothing and just lay in bed because your heart isn't being expanded enough, you weaken your heart. if you over-exercise your heart, you also weaken and tire it, especially if you over-exercise. You know, it is possible for conscious function of the ego to conflict with unconscious function of the ego. For example, one of the most common causes of heart attacks is if the heart is weak and you eat a big meal, the unconscious action of the ego drives all the blood to the stomach. But then suppose you decide to go out for a jog or a swim or something like that, the conscious action of the ego is performing all this exercise while the unconscious is digesting the food, and it lowers the amount of available blood to go back to the heart itself. That's where your heart attacks come from. But basically what I'm trying to say is no exercise is bad for the heart, and too much exercise is bad for the heart. Just in the same way that we have to drive our blood by our spiritual actions to heal the heart, to work with the heart itself, we have to keep a good moderation between action and inaction. So there are, I guess there are a few other things that I could say, but I think those are the significant kinds of things. I think that I've learned a lot recently. All of my life I've been a freak for consciousness. And I've never realized the unconscious value of the spirit. And it must be given due and full respect. And we can even put our attention to the unconscious even if we're not conscious of it. I'll give you an example of what it's like. When I first got involved in spiritual things, the first thing I learned about was cause and consequence. And I learned that there were no mistakes. And I was with my friend. We were both really deeply involved in this, and we would go to play pool. And somebody would make one of those fortuitous shots, and I remember telling my friend after he had just sunk a ball that it seemed, it seemed all luck. And I said, "Boy, what a slop shot!" And he looked up at me from the pool table, and he said, "There is no luck." And then I realized that it is possible to, in one way, have a conscious activity where you have the skill to manipulate the pool balls to do very remarkable things. But at the same time, you can put your attention into the unconscious function of the ego, and you can sort of control the whole gestalt of the pool game. Only the two dare not conflict with each other. That we actually have a duty to put our attention into the unconscious action of the ego, because, for example, our food won't digest right. And I think it's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, I'd say, in the last 6 weeks. A very important spiritual lesson that has come to me, and that is we are responsible for the unconscious actions just as well. And we should not only put our mind into, like doing all these wonderful mental things or put everything into prayer. We also have a duty to keep our bodies healthy, not only by conscious action, but by, because, like, for example, the spirit works its way into the digestive process. Supposedly, the more instinctual, unconscious forces of the desire body, for example, work from the bottom up, whereas the conscious activity works from the top down, and they meet in the pancreas. And the pancreas is the vehicle of the spirit impressing itself on the lower digestive tract, which is in the camp of the desire body. And somebody who is off thinking too much and working on consciousness and not putting attention into the pancreas is somebody who is lopsided in the conscious-unconscious activity of the spirit. All right. I could review, but I don't think it's necessary to go over all of these things again and again. So we have in the heart a very autonomous organ, something that represents the willingness and the desire of the spirit in its vehicles to live. And there are some important principles to be learned in the way it is designed, in the way it functions, and especially, I want to give you a brief thing. What always happens in these things is when you're sitting in your study quietly and pondering these things or reading these things, then all the subtle intuitions take place. But it's really helpful to take the cosmoconception and lay it down along a physiology book, alongside a physiology book. You can't do it because I got your physiology book. And things that are just mentioned en passant in the cosmoconception, for example, things like that, when you read physiology, it gives you great insight. And if you can see the way things are working in your body, especially when there's malfunction in your body, it gives you an understanding of what in your whole character, what, like is your desire body at odds with your life spirit? Or is the desire body or the conscious function of the spirit in conflict with the unconscious? Or is there a conflict between the human spirit and the life spirit? And our health, be it good or bad, is a wonderful, wonderful way of telling us what's taking place in our body. And that's what I'm trying to give these talks about every time. And I'm also trying to break out of always talking about the same things. Okay, I think we're ready to take a picture while we still have sunlight. Oh, okay. All right.